Challenges for the LGBTQ community in Canada. Canada is a gay-friendly country, and its largest cities, such as the Church and Wellesley in Toronto, the Gay Village Business District in Montreal, Davie Village in Vancouver, and the Bank Street Gay Village in Ottawa, have their own gay districts and communities. Men of Canadian cities: Toronto 18%, Montreal 17%, Vancouver 10%, Ottawa Gatineau 5%. Although Canada is generally seen as LGBTQ friendly, the LGBTQ community still faces challenges. Part of the problem: discrimination and racism. Despite legal protections, discrimination against LGBTQ people occurs in many places such as work, gardening, housing, health and education. Discrimination against LGBTQ people continues to be a concern, with reports of violence and harassment. Transgender rights and health care. Transgender and transgender people often face particular challenges related to legal recognition, access to health care, clean drinking and gender recognition. The waiting time for gender surgery and access to specialized medical care can be particularly long in some states. Mental health problems. Compared to the general population, LGBTQ individuals have higher rates of mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and suicide. This can be attributed to many factors such as racism, social discrimination and rejection, homelessness and homelessness. LGBTQ youth are particularly at risk of homelessness due to family separation or disagreements about their sexuality or their parents' gender. Homeless shelters may not be equipped to provide adequate support and services to LGBTQ individuals. Intersectionality. Intersecting identities in the LGBTQ community, such as people of color, foreigners, or people with disabilities, can cause more pressure from people. These individuals may experience discrimination and conflict based on many aspects of themselves. Access to LGBTQ healthcare. While Canada has made great strides in LGBTQ inclusive healthcare, some people still struggle to access influential and reputable healthcare providers that are popular, particularly in remote or rural areas. This affects physical and mental health. Educational inclusion. Despite efforts to incorporate LGBTQ education into the school curriculum, challenges remain. Some schools and communities may oppose the teaching of sexuality, which can create an environment that is not supportive of LGBTQ students. It is worth noting that the problems that LGBTQ people will encounter in different parts of Canada will be different. We continue to work hard to address these issues by working with advocacy, education, policy change, and LGBTQ organizations and support services. LGBT individuals live in large and small communities across Canada. While the largest and most significant LGBT communities are in major cities such as Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Ottawa, LGBT communities or gay communities such as Church and Wellesley in Toronto, Davie Village in Vancouver and Guy Village in Montreal have become hubs of LGBT culture and tourism. Because the Canadian census does not require respondents to state their sexual orientation, not many Canadians self-identify as LGBT. According to the Canadian Community Health Survey, an independent data source in 2015, 1.7% of respondents identified as gay and 1.3% as bisexual. However, unlike the census, the health survey is not a universal survey of all Canadians, but a voluntary, self-selected sample of people using specialized medical services. Same-sex marriage has been legal in Canada since the passage of the Civil Marriage Act in 2005, leading to the publication of census data for same-sex couples. 5. The 2006 Canadian census recorded approximately 7,500 same-sex couples nationwide, while the 2011 Canadian census reported 21,000. 5. However, 2011 data only included couples living in large cities. Statistics Canada found and published that as many as 4,500 platonic couples could be incorrectly counted as same-sex couples due to errors in registration. A little more about same-sex couples in small communities. 6. This error is most common in small communities, such as oil fields in Alberta, where people who report being married to the same woman are actually same-sex unmarried migrant workers. A person they live with on census day. A total of 4,444 Pride parades have been held in Canadian cities since Pride Week began in 1973, with attendance increasing due to Canadian laws and public policies. The LGBT test is easy. The largest festival to date is Toronto Pride Week, launched in 1981 after the Toronto Police Department launched and quot Operation Soap and quot the SPA protests, and LGBT backlash are considered the Canadian equivalent of the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York. Edmonton Pride also evolved from protests against the 1981 Edmonton, Alberta SPA attack, but the event didn't add competition until the late 1990s. 7. Many Canadian cities, large and small, began celebrating each year, with the biggest and most famous celebrations in Toronto, Calgary Pride, Ottawa, Capital Pride, Montreal, Fierté Montréal, Halifax Pride, and Vancouver Pride. Toronto is the host city of World Pride 2014. As of 2017, every province and territory in Canada has at least one celebration each year. In recent years, especially in 2010, many Canadian cities have completed Pride events at less than regular gay venues. In addition to the events listed above, festivals are currently held in Cranbrook, Kamloops, Kelowna, Nanaimo, New Westminster, Prince George, Victoria and Whistler, British Columbia, Fort McMurray, Grande Prairie, Jasper, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat and Red Deer in Alberta, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan Prince Albert, Regina, Queen City Pride, and Saskatoon Pride. Brandon, Flin Flon, Portage la Prairie, Steinbach, Thompson, Manitoba, 10, and Winnipeg, Pride. Winnipeg, Belleville, Brockville, Cornwall, Durham District, Lake Elliott, Greater Sudbury Pride, Hamilton Pride, Kitchener-Waterloo Cambridge, Triple Pride, Guelph Pride, Halton District, Kenora, Kingston, London, Muskoka District, Niagara. Re-history homosexuality was legalized in Canada in 1969. Discrimination based on homosexuality was later legalized across the country, even enacting many laws in the 1990s. Same-sex marriage was recognized in 2005. Gender and gender expression were added to the Canadian Human Rights Act in 2017. Rights While anti-LGBT discrimination still persists in many areas, progress has been made in the recognition of social and legal equality in recent years. Canada is a recognized international leader in this field. There has been steady progress in recent years on everything from healthcare to adoption laws. In 2005, Canada became the fourth country to legalize same-sex marriage. When homosexuality was criminalized, the UK had a major influence on Canadian politics. For many years, homosexuality dates back to early colonial times and is officially illegal, and the penalty for hateful sex also known as sodomy, is the death penalty. In 1861, the law was relaxed a bit and the sentence was changed to 10 years and life imprisonment. But the following year, laws regulating homosexual behavior were tightened. They almost always target men, and, thanks to constant mystery, allow the police to make serious decisions. Beginning in the 1890s, accused gay men were often accused of grave immorality Amendments to the Penal Code in 1948 and 1961 added sex crimes through false labels such as criminal, misdemeanor and dangerous sex offender, second, sexual offense means that anyone commits a crime against a man of the opposite sex. Two important events that contributed to the freedom of Canadian policy and conduct in the 1960s. The first was the incarceration of Everett George Clippert, a Northwestern mechanic who was arrested for total violence in 1965. His sentence was extended after being described as a dangerous sex offender by a prison doctor. The decision sparked scrutiny and criticism from the mainstream media. Second, the UK Parliament's decision to decriminalise certain sex crimes. In 1957, a study called the Wolfenden Report recommended judicial review, and debate on the subject raged in the British and Canadian media for a decade. The proposal was finally approved in the summer of 1967. And as the scandalous Clippert debate continued, many members of the Canadian Parliament began calling for reform, including Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. After Trudeau was elected Prime Minister, his government passed Bill C-150 in May 1969, which legalized same-sex marriage for the first time in Canadian history. Gay freedom in the 1970s. The modern gay liberation movement in North America began in the summer of 1969 with the unprecedented Stonewall riots in New York City. In the early hours of June 28, the NYPD tried to raid a gay bar in downtown Greenwich. However, the guards responded, causing an embarrassing incident that attracted police and national media attention. On the first anniversary of the strike, marches were held in New York, Boston, Minneapolis, Chicago, San Francisco and Los Angeles. Rainbow gay pride flags and Canadian flags fly over Vancouver, British Columbia. Photo date: the 8th of May 2012. Meanwhile, power is rising in Canada. In August 1971, the first gay rights demonstrations were held in Ottawa and Vancouver, small demonstrations demanding an end to all forms of discrimination against gays and lesbians in the state. A year later, Toronto hosted its first festival, with a picnic on the Toronto Islands. Organized by the University of Toronto Gay Association, Toronto Gay Action Now, and the Toronto Gay Community Association. In the early 1970s, Canada's first gay publication, Body Rights, was launched in Toronto in 1971 and ran until 1987. Today, its publisher, Pink Triangle Press, publishes the Daily Extra, with editions in Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver. Pink Triangle Press also founded the Canadian Lesbian and Lesbian Archives in 1973, which is now a respected and historical collection of LGBT material. One of the most important events in the body law took place in 1978. Pink Triangle Press was accused of obscene material for distribution because of an article about pedophiles titled Men Love Men Love Men . In 1983, the prosecution refused to appeal the second sentence and the final sentence. Second Circuit Judge Thomas Mercer ruled that the article encourages pedophilia but said it was very good law to promote content that most Canadians consider unacceptable. Late 1970s also passed two major laws. In 1977, Quebec amended its human rights law to prohibit discrimination based on sex. That same year, Canadian immigration laws were also changed to lift the ban on gay immigration. While LGBT rights were flourishing in the 1980s, gays and lesbians still faced discrimination, including violence against the police. In 1981, the unrest in Toronto culminated in what became known as the Canadian Stonewall Incident. On February 5, 1981, Toronto police arrested approximately 300 people in 4 locations during the protests. The next day, 3,000 people took to the streets, marching to the 52nd Division Police Station and Queen's Park, smashing windows and setting the streets on fire. Men are accused of being seen in brothels, which the police interpret as any place where there is morality . Most of the charges were denied.